Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you with everybody about our dashboard and the data lab. I'm going to start a timer to make sure I leave enough time for Mike and Wes, who really were the architects of this dashboard and are going to do a great job lifting it up. Slide, please, Wes. So this gives a brief timeline of the data lab and its growth. So in January 2018, DA Larry Krasner was sworn in Philadelphia. More than a year later, in November 2019, the data lab was established with the launch of the dashboard. As everybody here knows, the dashboard can't just be built like that. So as I said, Mike and Wes were here previously already building the dashboard, but we thought it was a nice opportunity in launching the dashboard to announce the data lab, the district attorney's transparency analytics lab. In January 2020, we expanded thanks to foundation support from Arnold Ventures and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. The goal is to create a researchable prosecutorial office in the criminal justice reform era. And that funding allowed us to expand from 5.5 people to more than 20 in the data lab and a 9-person IT development team that is building a custom in-house case management system. You can learn more about that partnership at data.phila.do.com/research. And today I'm going to talk very briefly on what the data lab does, dividing it into 4 different topics or themes. We're a help desk, in-house rapid response for what units might need, or increasingly comms. We do operational support, both for our office and the system more broadly. And then we support policy development. And then we do what we think of as being an in-house think tank and research partner, both doing things, projects that are informed by our close familiarity with the data, and also partnering with external academic and other institutions to use data and evaluate our work. Next slide, please, Wes. This is an example of an email that came in a little over a week ago. We have a new supervisor of the municipal court unit, and she reached out asking for information on MC cases that were open in her unit. Wes, if you could there you go. This was sent at 5:30 on a Tuesday. Animate, please. At 10:59 the next day, she's provided with some tables showing how many open cases they have and the number and a breakdown of the lead charge on each of those dockets. Next slide, please, Wes. This shows some of our operational work. First, the COVID-19 response. Our unit worked with the local jails, the public defenders, the courts as the conduit for information so that cases of people who are in jail who might be able to be released when COVID first hit were able to be reviewed systematically, both by ADAs in our office and by the public defenders. This helped lead to a reduction in the jail population that you can see there to a low point of 3,645 on the 8th of May. We also have worked to generate a series of automated emails that go out to different units for different purposes. And I'll touch on the one in bold, the Queer Affinity Group arrest check, on the next slide. We also support weekly work on non-fatal shootings and gun possession in collaboration with the Philadelphia Police Department. I think that meeting might be happening now or happened yesterday. And then we also support the office's annual budget presentations. Next slide, please, Wes. This shows some of the work that we have done to support policy. First with prosecutor-led bail reform, which was implemented 50 days into the Krasner administration. Then policies implemented in 2018 and 2019 to end mass supervision. And then what you see on the right-hand side is an example of some of the data that comes out of the new system that was developed to track victimization among LGBTQ populations. Next slide, please, Wes. This shows what we do as a think tank. My timer's going off, so I'll wrap up. We've supported external research, for example, the study by Orly Oos and Megan Stevenson on bail reform in Philadelphia that came out the same day as our own internal report. And we were able to say that we're not only the only people who are looking at this and saying that it worked and that the sky didn't fall. There was an additional recidivism. There was not an increase in FTA following reform. We also supported external research on the resentencing of juvenile lifers in Philadelphia and showed that there was very low recidivism. And Philadelphia had the largest population of juvenile lifers in the country, so that was really important. And then just last week, we came out with a collaborative report with the police, Department of Public Health, Defender Association, and others, looking at people arrested for shootings in Philadelphia. And then I'll transition to Mike by saying that I think the dashboard is all of these things, right? It helps do things that are, data help desk. People can just go to the dashboard themselves. It provides operational support. We often see things on the dashboard that we then dig into further to see what's going on, and the other two categories as well. Thank you so much. Take it away, Mike. You're on mute, Mike.
Did I unmute? Great. Thank you for having us, and sorry for talking on mute. 2 years into the pandemic, I still haven't figured that one out. So just a little overview of how we built the dashboard and sort of how we conceived of it, and then Wes is going to go over what the dashboard actually is. So the dashboard was conceived, I say, in March 2019, because that's when we really sat down with the DA and talked about what it would be. But he talked about data transparency during the campaign a year and a half prior to that. The dashboard itself was built by me and Wes, spending an extraordinary amount of our time, not all of it, but most of our time between May and September of 2019. So it's like 4 months of time to build it. Although I will say that that was built on the back of 6 to 9 months of the two of us also working together to wrangle all of the data within our office. There wasn't really a great handle on the data, how to even do basic things like count cases. It sounds easy, but I'm sure, as David and others could tell you, even something as simple as counting how many cases were opened in a time period is a sometimes complicated operation. The dashboard was launched in October 2019, and when we launched it, it was really pretty lightweight. It was just 8 pages of data focusing on the life cycle of a criminal incident from start to finish. And Wes is going to go through some of those pages, but I think we followed in many ways the same model that King County did, which is really trying to walk people in the public from start to finish as to what's going on in the system. And one of the things that was really a driving force behind this for us is that the only data that existed in Philadelphia to this point was the Philadelphia police data on incidents. And we want to make sure people understood what happens after an incident. How many of those people are arrested? How many of them are charged? What happens when they're convicted? How long is their sentence, and so on. The data that we use for this itself, we did not have, or we don't have, a real case management system. We're building one as part of the grant that Oren mentioned. And we have like a light case management system, but it does not have enough actionable data to do anything useful with for a dashboard like this. And so the dashboard is built almost entirely using police data that we get because we have a charging function in Philadelphia. So the police send us all of the data about people that they arrest, and then we make decisions about whether or not to charge them. So we have data on every arrest in the system. And then we have court data because we have to operate as members of the court, and the courts give us data every single day about how cases are being processed, what cases have been open, what status they're in, when their listings were, who the judge was, what the outcomes were, what the sentences are, and so on. So we use all of that data, we marry those two things together, and then we do a lot of work on the back end to sort of make that data understandable, readable, usable, and then from there we produce the dashboard. Next slide, please, Wes. One of the driving principles in making the dashboard was simplicity. And it was simplicity on a number of different domains. So one is, this is something that builds automatically. So all the work that Wes and I did, we made it so it can run every night in a script. No one's touching it. The data was built this morning. It will be built tomorrow, the next day, and the next day without any intervention. It doesn't require any manual entry. So, we talked about wanting to have certain data on here, and we've not put some of it on because it would require a person regularly to update a spreadsheet and move that spreadsheet somewhere. So we try to avoid that kind of information. Instead of the really nice interactivity that David was showing off, we actually only have simple HTML pages. And we did this for 2 reasons. One is because it doesn't require us to maintain any kind of a server. So we're not, everything is hosted on an external server that's GitHub. And so that takes down some maintenance costs for us. And also it avoids the potential of a data breach. So if somebody broke into that server, none of our data is there, just these static HTML pages. And then finally, and this is a good transition to Wes, the pages themselves are simple and we use repeated design patterns. And the idea in that is that anyone can come look and figure out what the first page is showing them. And then every single page after that has the same information or different information, but presented in the same way. So it's easy to understand and walk through the page for people who really don't have a lot of familiarity with data or the criminal justice system. So Wes, why don't you take it from here and show off the dashboard itself?
You have 5 minutes remaining.
Thanks. They say you shouldn't do live demos, but that's what we're going to try to do right now. Quickly switching my window. Okay, so this is the landing page for the dashboard. It has a very sparse amount of information on it, and it starts off with I guess comms, marketing, however you want to think about it. We have a slider up top. It lets us like showcase kind of the more important stories that we want to share. And right below that, we have a couple key metrics, and these are just a handful of things that you can find throughout the site that at the time that we launched the site, we wanted to put up front. And then below that, we have something called data stories. And this is something that we do that's sort of separate from the dashboard, but as a supplement to it, we, as a unit, I guess, will write kind of background on the criminal justice system in the city, what's happening. And these stories are like longer narratives that you can read through. It has nice animations, and we can be a little bit more creative there and give a lot more context to the data. We do provide, as Mike said, like we're trying to walk people through the system. So we provide a lot of background information on what's happening in the city and why this site exists, and what the role of the district attorney's office is. So like here we have a chart that we made that shows like what sort of the steps in case flow are. So there's incidents and arrests through charges all the way to sentencing. The nice thing about this chart is you can click it and it will take you to one of our reports. And these reports also exist in our menus up here. We have two kinds of reports, year-to-date reports. This is a little confusing sometimes, people, including people in our office who look at this all the time. Year-to-date reports, which is every year through the current day of the year. So it allows for easy year-to-year comparisons. And then year-end reports, which is the same thing, but it's full years rather than year-to-date. So this is what a report looks like. This is the charge report. This is just a count of how many charges are filed by our office. And we have it broken down into various categories. First up front is all offenses, where we have just a simple line chart that shows just the trend over time and a map of the city, currently using police districts that shows like where these cases are concentrated in the city. And we provide tabs for each offense category. These are broad categories that we've defined ourselves, where if you look at it, you will see in greater detail, like of all of the things that we're considering part of that category. So we have a violent category, which includes a lot of the things you might consider to be violent. Property, drugs, firearms, these are possessory firearm offenses, and other offenses that don't really fit the other categories, but we still want to report on. So one thing that we did recently is we linked all of these things to definitions. So we have a pretty extensive like glossary of definitions. So you can click any one of these. It'll take you to the definition of that offense, including the statute that is used to define it. So if somebody is charged with strangulation, you can link straight to the Pennsylvania General Assembly website, which tells you exactly what that is if you want real detail, but we also provide summary information up front. We have another type of report. This is the simplest report. It's just counting one thing, which is charges. So let's look at a year-end report. We have slightly more complicated reports. These are multivariate reports where we're taking several things. Each category, each offense has a breakdown of several possible
You have 1 minute
outcomes.
remaining.
Wow. So it's a little more complicated. We allow for collapsing tables where we've categorized, in this case, bail into its like various components. We've sectioned off like these areas. I'll let you look at that more while I quickly go through a number of other things. Data is complicated, so we've provided a series of caveats. This is sort of our hand wringing over the data that we have. And it's quite long, as you can see, and it changes and grows and shrinks sometimes as we figure things out. But we try to be as open and honest about the data that we have as possible. And we also have another kind of report. We call these special reports. And this also allows us to give a lot more context, more narrative. This is a report on the impact of COVID-19 on the system. And it has similar tab structure as our other pages. But like in this case, has allowed us to, provide a lot more context than we normally would. And then finally, I want to talk about the research page. And this is a lot of what Oren was talking about. It gives a breakdown of the data labs, various external research that we're doing, internal and external research, all the partnerships that we have, links to the publications that we've released, and where possible, the papers that have been produced through collaboration with our office. So I think that's all we have. Just gonna real quick go back to the PowerPoint for our final slide. This is a slide showing all the names. You'll see this later, and I believe that is all. So thank you.